Hey everyone, welcome back, or if you're just joining us, welcome to KSSP Podcast. I'm Spencer.
And I'm Katie. Today we're going to be talking about how to have difficult conversations and why we would want to work on that as part of our series on difficult conversations. So first, we've got some tips here from a couple different articles. I just kind of took their bullet points and I'm going to just expand upon them myself. I'm not going to read the whole thing word for word here, but they did have some good main points. So this is Reach Out in Australia, and it's 6 steps to help you tackle difficult conversations. So yeah, the first is to listen. So you just want to actively listen while the other person is talking to you and pay attention to what they're saying to you and what that means. So if you don't understand something or you'd like to understand it further, don't be afraid to ask questions. And don't make assumptions on how the other person is going to react. Take what they're saying for what it is, not as if they have an alternative agenda, unless you know with certainty that they do. Remember that certainty is not a feeling, it's a conclusion based off of the given evidence. And then the next tip is to be clear about how you feel and what you want. So you want to think about this ahead of time. Write down a list of how the situation makes you feel, and then write another list for what you want to gain from the conversation. This can help you figure out how to best address the issue so that your needs are being met. And make sure to use I statements and not you statements. Don't accuse the other person of anything. Just tell them your observations and how you are feeling and personally affected by their actions and or words. And then be sure not to leave out any important facts or details, and don't leave anything you are feeling. Don't leave out anything you're feeling either. The best way to get what you want from the conversation is to be direct. And then next we've got look at the issue from their perspective. Think about how the other person is feeling and why they're acting the way that they are. This isn't a way to condone bad behavior, but rather a way to best reach through to the person you're speaking with. If you can't understand how they're feeling, then you can't help them to change. So is this something that the person is doing regularly, or does this seem a bit out of character for them? This is an important question that's going to help you figure out why that they do or did the problematic behavior and how best to address it. And if things aren't going to plan, just take a break. It's okay to walk away from unproductive and aggressive conversation. If you need to take a break from the talk, that is perfectly fine, as long as you don't put it on the back burner forever. Taking breaks can be helpful for addressing your concerns. So once you both cooled down, just readdress the conversation from a place of objectivity to the best of your ability. Of course, you're both going to hold biases, but it's best to acknowledge and address these biases in a calm and respectful manner. And then if you need to, having a non-biased third party join you for this conversation can be really helpful. This is going to help prevent biases, emotional outbursts, manipulation, and more. Therapists are the best option, but if you don't have access to a therapist, that's perfectly fine. You can find a mutual friend or family member to help mandate the conversation and mediate it. And then the next tip is agree to disagree. Don't expect the other person to immediately concede to you on your points. You may have differences in opinion on the matter, and that's okay. If there's still a disagreement, it's also okay to hold boundaries. As we mentioned before, boundaries are different from rules because they don't tell a person what they can or can't do, but rather they let the other person know what action you will take if they continue with the problematic behavior. And then finally, look after yourself. If the conversation doesn't end as you hoped it would, remember to give yourself some love and engage in self-care. Self-soothing behavior can be helpful for helping us to process what has just happened while also remembering our worth. These conversations can make us feel hopeless at times, but it's always better to have the conversation go in a different direction than hoped for than it is to not have the conversation at all. So next we've got psychology. Oh, okay. Okay. So, okay. Similar format here to the last one I just did. So first we're going to look at their key points though. All relationship conflicts are caused by interaction effects, not by one person or the other. During a big talk, be sure to communicate purposefully, offer solutions, and don't blame people. And listening is the most important strategy in difficult conversations, so use empathy and consider the other person's perspective. So, all right, tip number 1 is to have a goal in mind. And as we mentioned in the last article, it's important to think of what our goals are ahead of time. Make sure to have a loose plan for the conversation that'll best help you to reach your goals. And the next one, use non-blaming communication styles. Again, you want to use I statements, not you statements. Focus on your personal observations and how those things make you feel. Never assume how the other person is feeling or why they're acting the way that they are. We also never want to assume what other behaviors they might be engaging in if there's no actual evidence for these assumptions. And then next, we also want to recognize that complex interpersonal problems have complex interpersonal causes. So don't forget to address your role in the situation. This is not to place blame on you for their behavior, but rather to determine what, if any, interactions between the two of you have led to the behavior. And the solution may not be as simple as getting your way. Compromise is key to change behavior. And then next, you want to accept criticism if it's on topic. If it's off topic, try to steer the conversation back on topic without getting defensive. The best way to do this might be, well, I think your concern is valid. I don't think it's relevant to the conversation. We can have another conversation about that later, but for now, I'd like to be able to focus on X. However, if the criticism is on topic, really self-reflect on this. Again, do not get defensive, even if you don't think criticism is valid. Ask them what makes them think that about you, and really take the criticism in. Don't assume that the other person is the only one who needs to change. Take accountability for these criticisms and make sure their criticism is integrated into the solution and that it's compromised. Don't allow on-topic criticism to take away from the conversation you initially started. You can quickly address it in 5 minutes or less, but make sure once it's addressed that you steer the conversation back to the original point at hand. Next, we have phase requests towards the positive. So empathize that both of you will benefit from the changes you wish to make. Keep things positive so that the other person is more willing to work on a solution with you. Next, we have don't feel the need for total victory. The conversation isn't a competition. It's a way for us to reach our goals with other people. There may be disagreements, but this doesn't make either person right or wrong necessarily. You don't want to, also remember that it may take time for the other person to fully process what you said to them. They may not agree with you that there's even a problem, but give them a little time. A week is typically a good amount of time to wait before seeing if the other person's going to change their point of view or not. And again, it's better to have the conversation and come to a disagreement than to not address the issues at all. And having the conversation is a victory in itself, regardless of the outcome. Finally, don't forget to listen. We talked about this point before, but be prepared for unexpected reactions, as we are not always going to be able to predict how the other person will react and what they're going to say. You really want to listen to them. Don't just wait for them to finish speaking so you can make your next point. And then I do have some more points as well that aren't mentioned in those articles. So my next tip would be don't use accusatory language. Simply express how you're feeling, what you're thinking, and how this influences your actions. Don't be afraid to hold boundaries either, but don't aim for total control. You can only control yourself. You can't control other people. Think of the serenity prayer. tell yourself, this is a serenity prayer. It says, I have the serenity to accept the things I cannot control, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I just think that's a really good quote that can help people approach this with the right mindset. And then next tip from me would be, if you need to bring a neutral third party, whether it's a mutual friend or family member, a professional such as a therapist, even a clergy member if you're religious, or someone from your church, you can, like a church leader, you can bring them into the conversation. And that can often help to prevent things such as manipulation, insults, non-constructive criticism, and tempers being lost. Not that it's always going to prevent these things, but a neutral third party can help mediate the situation most of the time.
Yeah. And then I have just a couple of tips here as well. So one of the first tips is just, it's always important to avoid common dialogue pitfalls, and those could include phrases such as, yeah, but, or that happens to me and my group too, or that doesn't happen to me, so it doesn't exist. And then, or I know someone who, whatever, and they don't agree with you. So any of those just I would say a lot of times end up shutting down the conversation rather than building on it and leading it to where it needs to go. Like, it kind of closes the dialogue rather than opening it, I would say. And then another tip is just try to understand the situation more. So you may need to state your desired outcome, whether out loud or just to yourself in your head, just to let you know. You may want to ask the person for more information so you can try to understand maybe where they're coming from too, so that you guys can understand each other, because a lot of times understanding helps lead conversations to where they need to go. And then acknowledge and validate each other's points as much as possible too. Another tip is to make sure you maintain focus on the right motive. So if you end up finding yourself falling for any of the traps we discussed in the previous video, and you can stop and pay attention to your motives. So the questions you could ask yourself if you find yourself falling for one of those pitfalls is, what do I want for myself? For others? For the relationship? How would I behave if this were what I really wanted? And what does my behavior tell me about what my motives are? And then another tip is to make an and statement, is what it is called. So that will help you avoid the either or pitfall. So to do this, you'll want to think of what you want. So for example, you may want your partner to pay more attention to you. So then you're going to think of what you don't want. So again, for example, you don't want to have a conversation that leads to fighting and broken emotions. So third, then you're going to combine the two with and. So for example, that would be, how can I have a conversation with my partner about being more attentive and avoid fighting or broken emotions? So it's kind of figuring out how, basically it's just trying to get your brain thinking about how you can achieve what you want, what you desire, but also try to avoid what you don't want. So just kind of helps get your brain, those gears in your brain churning, so that you can try to come up with a solution. And it helps you think of solutions that you might not have thought of if you only were thinking of those two as separate things instead of thinking of them together. Another tip is learning to look. So let's just kind of thinking about the topic under discussion and what people are doing in response. So that could be content and behavior, or either or. And then you just want to know your cues for when a conversation is turning difficult. And that could be physical, behavioral, or emotional. It's going to be different for each of us, but it's important to understand ourselves so that we can notice that the conversation is taking a turn. Like, we just need to be able to pay attention to our own bodies to understand what our cues are, whether, again, that's physical, behavioral, or emotional, so that we can understand ourselves more too. And then you also want to be able to see others if they are displaying like silence or violence, like we talked about. So just kind of being able to understand yourself and your cues, but also then kind of start to just pay attention to how the people around you during these conversations are responding as well. And then if you kind of notice that the conversation is taking a turn, another thing you can do is attempt to make the conversation safe. So with that, you could step out, make it safe, and then step back in. And some ways to make it safe is finding a mutual purpose. So you'll want to commit to seeking a mutual purpose with the other person. And with that, you'll want to recognize purposes. So you'll want to ask people why they want what they are pushing for, and then separate what they're demanding from the purpose it serves. And then you're going to invent a mutual purpose and then brainstorm strategies to help you guys come to that mutual purpose. And then mutual respect. And that's just kind of finding similarity, because a lot of times when we have opinions that vary, we may end up thinking that this other person is nothing like us. But I think a lot of times, more often than not, it's easier to find similarities between people, between each other, than I think we like to admit sometimes. So once you can do that, it kind of, again, opens the conversation, the dialogue, rather than closing it. You can, and we all should, apologize when appropriate. And then another tip is contrast, to make it safe, is contrasting to fix misunderstanding. So with that, there's a don't/do statement. So to do that, you will address, a don't/do statement addresses others' concerns that you don't respect them or that you have a malicious purpose. That's the don't part. And then confirms your respect or clarifies your real purpose, the do part. It is not apologizing. It provides context and proportion, and it's used as prevention or first aid. And then try to have the conversation on neutral ground, or places where both parties can feel safe. Instead of having the conversation at your house, try maybe at a coffee shop, for example. Having the conversation on neutral territory will help both of you feel comfort and help you have an equal balance of power subconsciously.
All right, and then, so we're going to ask ourselves, what are the benefits of working on our skills as far as difficult conversation goes? A key skill of effective leaders, teammates, parents, and loved ones is the capacity to skillfully address emotionally and politically risky situations and issues.
And most influential individuals, so those who can get things done and build on relationships, are those who have been able to master having these difficult conversations.
Yeah, and people who routinely hold crucial conversations and hold them well can express controversial and even risky opinions in a way that gets them heard.
And companies and teams perform better and can often meet deadlines when they're able to have these difficult conversations. So that can be like, if they feel like the expected deadlines are unrealistic, are they able to go to the boss or leader and let them know? And if they feel they can and they're able to have those difficult conversations, it has been shown that they can respond 5 times faster. Like, those companies respond 5 times faster to financial downturns. They save over $1,500 in an 8-hour workday for every difficult conversation they have rather than avoid. It increases trust and influences change in colleagues.
And most importantly, people who can have these difficult conversations are better equipped to have their needs met. So now that we've discussed difficult conversations, join us on our final video for today, where we go over some of our thoughts regarding them.
And as always, you can leave a comment below if you have any topics that you want to hear us talk about in future episodes.
Yeah, you can reach out to us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And we also occasionally Twitch live streams, so you can follow us there to get notified when we do.
And don't forget to give this video a like, as well as follow or subscribe to our other social media accounts and turn on notifications so that you know when our content comes out. You get notified. Otherwise, we will see everyone in the next video.